Hi all, and welcome to this new video where we are going to be breaking down the Rebel Alliance faction in Star Wars Legion. The Rebel Alliance are one of the mainline Legion factions. They were one of the first two released for it. While in a tough spot currently, they have new units coming out that may be able to counter this as well. It is a collection of all of your favorite original trilogy characters with access to a surprisingly versatile miniature range, and they have a very high skill cap on how to use their many options optimally. And even though they are in a tough spot, this is not meant to discourage you from starting them. My next army is going to be a Rebel army. Being in a tough spot in Legion does not mean you are losing every game. It just means there are things better than you that other people will most likely run when you play against them, like the Empire's Blizzard Force, for instance. The strengths of the Rebel Alliance are, almost everything has surge to attack and defend. There are a lot of movement options for your units. Some get free moves, others can forward deploy, some get moves at the beginning of the game. It is very useful and makes you very mobile. You also have a selection of solid vehicles as well. And the next strength is in the command cards. Almost all of them are good or have uses. Even what seems like a bad command card is not as bad compared to other factions' bad command cards. Alright, starting with the Rebel-only command cards. There are only 3 of these cards. The first one is Sabotage Communications. It is a 1-pip. It is a good way to mess with your opponent, especially a Shadow Collective opponent, as it makes you issue fewer orders to a unit. Next up is Turning the Tide. Turning the Tide lets you remove 2 suppression tokens on support and heavy units. This is not as useful as it was on release, as your support and heavy units are not going to have as much issues with suppression. In fact, I would say you can pretty much ignore it. Covering Fire is a 3-pip that is really useful. After a friendly core unit has performed a ranged attack, another friendly unit near you gets a dodge token. It's simple, it's good, it's not as good as some of the other cards, but if you need a 3-pip and this is all you can take, you're going to get use out of it. Next up are Luke's command cards. Luke has 6 command cards allowing for him to be a linchpin for a list, but be careful. If he is taken out, then you may be left with some unusable cards. Starting off with, Son of Skywalker is a great card to keep in your back pocket for a second or third round to try and play and kill an important enemy unit. Performing an additional attack, especially if you're using Operative Luke, is really good. Return of the Jedi is a decent 3-pip that can allow you to buff nearby troops and keep suppression down so no one is panicked. This is something good to use if you're going against an Empire gunline army. And it does give out dodge tokens as well. My Ally is the Force does a decent job of giving out dodge tokens to friendly troops. I Am a Jedi is a great way to control the battlefield. It is a 3-pip and allows you to completely shut down 2 enemy units at range 1 for a turn. When played correctly, this means you can wipe Vader off the board, really any enemy hero off of the board without any trouble. Full of Surprises allows Luke to roll a minimum of an additional 3 defense dice per attack directed at him. This increases survivability by a lot. But not being able to issue other orders is a downside. The good news is, Luke will probably live through the turn you play this on. You Serve Your Master Well is another great mess with the enemy card. For a 1-pip, you can take an enemy's heavy hitter and turn it on themselves, messing with the enemy's battle plan for a turn. It's good. Next up are Leia's command cards, which are focused on allowing you to keep your infantry mobile and alive. Somebody Has to Save Our Ship gives a lot of orders and can be a game changer by giving another free order token. It is a 3-pip, but you are doing a lot here. Coordinated Bombardment is a great 1-pip and gives access to ridiculously high range bombardment. No Time for Sorrow lets you get a unit that is exposed a bit closer to being safer. Or if done right, lets them pop back into cover after an aggressive activation the previous turn. But be careful how you use it. Han Solo's command cards focus on trickery and forcing your opponent to do something they don't want to. Sorry About the Mess is a 0-pip that is treated as a 1-pip while building the deck. Being a 0-pip guarantees you first turn, and you also get a dodge token for him out of it, so it's not impossible to use. Reckless Diversion means that enemy troopers have to attack a trooper unit that has a face-up order token if able. This is really good if used in tandem with something that can deflect like Luke, or just a heavy armor hitter or something with a lot of defense dice you can roll this turn through other buffs you can give it. Change of Plans just lets you force your opponent to change their plans on the fly. It can be very annoying to go up against to have someone reject your command card. Next up is Jyn Erso's command cards. Jyn's command cards are focused on synergies with trooper units. Rebellious gives Jyn a free attack on an enemy unit if it activates close to her. This is very useful, as it lets you take a suppression to get an attack, and suppression works a little bit better on Jyn. Trust goes both ways, removes 2 suppression tokens from Jyn and gives teamwork to a trooper unit, which makes any aim or dodge token one unit gets also go to the other as well, essentially duplicating them. This is situationally useful, but not terrible. Complete the mission gives Jyn an extra autosave and gives friendly units a suppressive token, but prevents all units with the face-up order from being panicked or suppressed, which is a give and take here. This also gives them a free save, as suppression lets you take cover 1, essentially. Cassian and Andor's command cards are very interesting. There are 4 of them, which is a small oddity, but they are built to work well with troopers and K2SO. Sacrifice is K2SO's one. It gives him Guardian 4, which allows him to take damage onto himself. And at the end of K2's activation, you may choose a friendly commander or operative unit, and enemies cannot perform ranged attacks against them until the end of the turn. This is really, really good, but also means K2 is probably going to die. Volunteer Mission lets you take Danger Sense and a suppression, allowing for a free save for those units. But since it doesn't stop a unit from being suppressed, it is situational. It's good, but it's situational. Last Stand buffs a fellow commander or operative unit that has taken damage a lot, granting them 1 aim, dodge, or suppression token up to 3 total. This is really good to buff K2 with after using Sacrifice if he's still alive. Crackshot heavily buffs Cassian's shooting. It also gives him Standby, which lets him be a more ranged threat as well, and gives him something to do after his activation. Next up are the Lando Calrissian command cards. Lando is a buff character that gives a lot of shooting and a few tricky buffs to your unit as well. Idiot's Array gives Lando a free attack and the ability to spend aim tokens to improve an attack dice instead of rerolling. You get more for having multiple command cards already discarded. Ace Up His Sleeve can be used as a command card, however it also lets you discard it after playing a different command card, and get 3 extra orders on the field. All in just makes you a powerhouse. Multiple enemy units get observation tokens, and if you say you are getting a crit, you get 2 extra crits for free if you actually roll it, and same with the save on any 2 dice you rolled. However, if you fail, you do lose 2 of the dice. It's a gamble, but it's a cool gamble. I will be talking more about his flaw card on his actual unit card as well, so don't be confused. Next up are the Chewbacca command cards. Chewbacca command cards focus heavily on him working with another of the original trilogy characters. Common Cause gives him the ability to activate after Luke or vice versa. Brains and Brawn give Chewie the ability to add one of his ranged weapons to Leia's attack pool if he is within range 3. Notorious Scoundrels lets you put one of Han's command cards back into your hand. A very useful trick to have up your sleeve and probably the best command card he has. Next up are Sabine Wren's command cards. Sabine's cards focus on buffing herself and some trooper units. Explosions gives her a solid extra attack for the rest of the game. Symbol of Rebellion does something that isn't on the card. You put a graffiti token at range 2 on a terrain piece and get the following. When a friendly unit in range 1 to 2 and in line of sight of the piece of terrain with the graffiti token rallies, you throw 1 additional die. When an enemy unit in range 1 to 2 and in line of sight to the terrain piece of graffiti token rallies, the player throws 1 fewer dice up to a minimum of 1. This is good. It is situational, but it is good. Legacy of Mandalore is another Inspire card that helps combat suppression and grants token. We've seen it already. It's good for her to have, but Symbol of Rebellion is what you want out of her command cards, and it's what you should be using if you take her. Finally, we have R2-D2 command cards. R2-D2's cards are built to mess with your enemy. Blast Off increases his speed and gives him survivability as well, letting him disengage, have jump 1, and he gets a dodge token and a suppression token. R2 usually moves really slow, so this is good. And Prop 2 Immolation gives you a decent weapon and a free move action after an attack. Again, useful in certain situations. Smokescreen gives you a light cover generator and the ability to get a sneaky move to another trooper. Next up, we are going to be talking about the Rebel Alliance's only Battleforce as of recording. The Echo-based Defenders Battleforce lets you do a few fun things, however it does limit the units you can take. It lets you take Leia, Luke, Chewbacca, and Han at the same time. This is the only way to have all 4 in one army. It has its own unique command cards, which I'm going to be going over after this. It severely limits all other Rebel units you can take. It lets you bring more support units, so 4 Tauntaun riders instead of 2 is a possibility, and probably a good way to run this list. The Battleforce command cards are very simple. Delaying Tactics gives you an extra way to mess with your opponent's activation order. Courage of Rebellion lets you refresh your spent cards. This is good if you build your army around it, not if not. Hold at any cost is a way to get some aim token generation and board control with standby, forcing the enemy to take the risk of being shot if they move any closer to you. Again, these build into what Echo-based Defenders is supposed to be, which is a defense force. You want the enemy to move towards you. I don't like playing like this. Some people do, and this is a good way to do it. It's a good series of buffs. This is going to be the start of a long breakdown of all of the units on the Rebel Alliance list. Starting with Luke Skywalker. Commander Luke is an okay choice. With Jump 1 and Move 2, he is a good mover. He's also strong with his blaster pistol and Anakin's lightsaber, but he is outdone by his operative side. Charge gives him a lot of use, especially with an all-black dice attack. Deflect means you want to use one activation to get a dodge token if you have no other way of getting it. And a blaster with Pierce is good, as it means you can't save it if you hit both of those shots. Leia Organa. Her Take Cover 2 helps get dodge token generation up on your army. Inspire 2 helps keep Empire gun lines from getting too much suppression on your units. Nimble means she always has one dodge token for herself. As long as she has one, she keeps it. Sharpshooter makes her okay shooting better since most cover saves can't be used against it. Han Solo. Han is a good gunslinger and excels at shooting. With Sharpshooter 1 and 2 shots each turn, with Double Surge base, Han is a very useful and hard to kill mini. Steady means you get a free shot after moving, so pumping out those 2 red dice shots is easy. Han is someone you want to be moving out of cover to take shots and then back into cover with his other move. The Rebel Officer. It is a generic commander. This is a unit to take only when you need him. He's been reduced to 45 points, and everything they can do, Leia can do better for 35 points more, as she was also reduced to 80. This is the only mention of points reduction in this video, but I had to point out just how bad he is in comparison to everyone else. Next up is Jyn Erso. She has a surprising amount of maneuverability and survivability, with Danger Sense 4 and Surge to Defend. She has also been reduced to 90 points. She can also be given a 5 white dice blaster or take the A180 for free, which either has 2 red, 1 white, or 2 black, 1 white depending on config. With her command cards, you can definitely find a use for her in your army. Now on to Cassian Andor. Cassian is a very interesting rebel commander. He has Covert Ops, which lets you get Infiltrate, increasing his survivability. His loadout works wonders with the different weapon cards he has. For 90 points, you get a versatile, hard-hitting hero that can fulfill almost any mold, and if you bring K2, he's even better. Lando Calrissian. Calrissian is a very trick-fueled commander. With contingencies, you get 3 extra command cards to use during the game, which is ridiculously powerful. He has Sharpshooter 2, he has Uncanny Luck 2, which both make his attacks and defense so much easier. However, this is all balanced out by a flaw card. After turn 3, you cannot use contingencies or Lando's command cards anymore, so setting up Lando's cards as your contingencies is a good bet. And since all 3 of his cards are good, you're looking at not too much bad in the end of it all. Our first operative, Chewbacca, is a powerhouse. Enrage gives him a free melee attack at 4 wounds. Expert Climber gives him extra mobility as well. Guardian and Teamwork help make Han and weaker rebel leaders live a lot longer. In addition to all of this, his command cards continue to make him an effective bodyguard. The only thing missing on him is a Surge to Defend, but with 9 health, you don't necessarily feel it as much. Next up is Sabine Wren. Sabine is interesting as she is a Mandalorian hero. She is also the only Mandalorian hero aligned with the Rebels. While they can take Din, he's not associated exclusively with them. Gunslinger means she is giving out her shots every turn. You can upgrade her with the Darksaber, and this increases her melee to 5 black die. The Darksaber with Nimble and her Surges make her a really good melee threat, although not as good as Force Wielders. Her personal combat shield gives her a regenerating wound for the battle, and I would not recommend ever charging her into a Force Wielder. She's not amazing against them on paper. She might be able to kill one, but she's better to use against weaker trooper units and clearing them out. Operative Luke is a much stronger choice than Commander Luke. He is a current staple of Rebel lists. He is a threat that can dominate the battlefield. With Master of the Force, you can ready choke every turn and kill an extra model, ready push every turn and mess around your enemy formations, or do so much more. With just his baseline stats, his only weakness is no surge to defend. However, with everything else he does amazingly, like the free melee action, disengage, immune to pierce, it's fantastic. Even though immune to pierce is usually used among all Force users, this is a really good unit. Next up is K2SO. K2SO can only be brought if Cassian is also on the field. Armor 1 and Teamwork makes him very survivable, and Calculate Odds means he can generate the tokens for him and Cassian pretty well. Incognito means you can move him out in the open without him getting shot off the board, which is good. And he can also be upgraded with a ranged weapon for just 5 points. It's probably worth doing if you take him. And last but not least on Rebel Operatives is R2-D2. R2-D2 is a cheap but simple annoyance you can toss at your enemies. He can get you an extra victory point, which is the main reason you would want to take him. Grounded in Movement 1 means getting him to the enemy is hard, and sometimes it can just not be worth the hassle. Repair gives him healing to your vehicles, which does make him worth it. C-3PO is an extra 15 points, and does make it so that you have an ability to force enemies to attack you no matter what. This is very, very situational, as you really just want to use him to get Secret Mission and get that extra victory point. Starting our core breakdown, the Rebel Troopers. The Rebel Troopers are your basic gunline troopers. They are very simple and save on whites. For 40 points, they don't cost much and serve as pretty decent objective controllers. They have some pretty decent upgrade cards as well. The Z6 Trooper especially adds 6 white dice to the attack pool. And the Ion Trooper is an amazing way to deal some anti-vehicle damage, as it also shuts down the enemy vehicle as well. Fleet Trooper is your next core unit. Fleet Troopers are your closer range gunline unit with zone control using ready. They have 2 upgrade cards. One is a kind of okay but worse than the Ion Trooper anti-vehicle gun with 1 black, 2 white dice. The other is a scatter gun with 2 red dice. Slightly better, but at 23 points it may not be worth the cost. Rebel Veterans are the most solid core unit that the Rebels have. Defend 1 and Emplacement Trooper makes them generate orders and tokens extremely well, allowing for an AI-like chain for just 8 points more than the base Trooper. Their upgrades, however, are not as good. Their upgrade card is a CM-0/93 Trooper, which gives another 4 white dice in the pool and critical 2. This is another card probably not worth taking unless it's the only option to get closer to 800 points. And next and final for the core are the Mark II Medium Blaster Troopers. The Medium Blaster Trooper can only be taken if the Rebel Veterans unit is in the detachment. All of their unit card abilities do one thing well: make it a strong deterrent and zone controller that the enemy has to pay attention to. Properly placed Medium Blaster Troopers can make it so the enemy cannot advance without risking losing a few models, especially with fire support. Starting our Special Forces breakdown are the Rebel Commandos. The first of 2 variations of Rebel Commandos. This unit is meant to be a longer range harassing unit that stays in cover. It has a sniper upgrade that increases its ranged output a good amount, adding 1 black, 2 white dice. And it has a special rule that prevents the enemy from using dodge tokens and makes their first successful save fail. The Proton Charge is their second upgrade card, and this is sorta like a mine. However, unless you're planting it on an objective, it's not really worth taking over the sniper. The second variation of Rebel Commandos, the Strike Team, is a more elite unit, as it only has 2 in it. They do almost the exact same thing, but for half the price and only 1 model. Their upgrade cards are shared with the original Rebel Commando team, and they're worth taking as a small activation filler unit that can get things done. The Wookie Warriors are the Rebels' first decent melee threat that isn't a commander, or operative. With Indomitable, Expert Climber, and Unhindered, they move fast across the field. All 3 of their upgrade cards are also useful. Bowcaster Wookie adds a red and white dice on ranged and is useful against vehicles. Battle Shield Wookie has 2 modes: Offensive, which gives 2 red dice to the melee pool, and Defensive, which is 2 black dice, but you gain the Armor 1 keyword, which lets you auto-save 1 non-crit hit. It is really good to increase these guys' survivability. Long Gun Wookie adds a 2 black dice attack into the army, but also gives units you shoot an extra suppression token. This is also good, as it kind of mimics the Empire gunline. Next up is the second variation of Wookie Warriors, the Wookie Warriors Kashyyyk Resistance. These Wookiees have a slightly longer range but weaker gun and slightly weaker melee. However, Sharpshooter 1 is useful and does balance it a little. They share the same upgrade cards with the original Wookie Warriors. I would not really take these over the original, but if you want to fill out a list with more Wookiees, it's also nice to have variation. Next up is Rebel Pathfinders, one of my personal favorite units. They are your all-around Special Forces choice. They have good survivability with Danger Sense 3. And Dauntless lets them keep 3 suppression without losing an action. Infiltrate lets you get those objectives much earlier than your opponent. Their main gun is the A300. It has 2 configs. The short range is the other, and it gives you 1 red at range 1 to 2. Pretty good, but situational. They have two unique characters, Pow and Biston. Pow gives you a 1 red and 1 white attack and free suppression token removal. Biston gives you an ion gun and 1 black and 4 white dice attack. Biston is cool. Next up are the Mandalorian Resistance. They are an interesting choice for special forces. Unlike their Shadow Collective brethren, the Mandalorian Resistance does not get access to shield, but they do get nimble instead, which could be better if they kept their independent activation. Jetpack rockets are a unique upgrade card that gives you decent anti-armor, but is also worse than the Shadow Collective one, as there aren't as many good ranged attacks you have with this unit as you do with the Shadow Collective one. They have one unique upgrade, and that is the Beskad Duelist, which gives 2 red dice in melee. Again, just not the best upgrade. Their surges are good, but that's about it. Next up is the Mandalorian Resistance Clan Wren version. These Mandos are a little better than the original. You can take Tristan and Erso as upgrades for normal Mandalorian Resistance, but if you bring Sabine, it is worth taking this as well. Erso gives you 1 black, red, and white dice attack to your range pool, and Dauntless, which lets you take a suppression token to get a free move in while suppressed. Tristan adds a 2 black dice ranged attack in, but gives the lethal and suppressive keywords, which makes the enemy autofail 1 save and gives them an extra suppressive token, which is good. This is a good unit of Mandos. All of them have 2 health, they're a little harder to clear off the board. Starting out our support is the ATRT. The first of the support options the Rebels have, the ATRT is a solid vehicle. Armor is super useful, and without a surge to defend is needed to keep this unit alive, especially saving on whites. Its Rotary Gun Blaster is a 5 black dice upgrade card that makes it a much bigger threat. It does have a Flamethrower card that does 2 black dice for every model in an enemy unit. However, it is only range 1, so it is a risk to get that close. Its Laser Cannon upgrade is a good anti-armor option, 1 red, 2 black dice. But the Rebels have better anti-armor options elsewhere, so it's not really worth taking. The 1.4 FD Laser Cannon team is situational. It's not terrible, but it's not amazing. The mini depends far too much on board setup. If there's too much terrain and line of sight blocking items, then you will never shoot anything until turn 2 or 3 unless the enemy gets really sloppy. There are no upgrades that are unique to this team. On paper it's okay, in practice it's probably not the best. The Tauntaun Riders give your enemy a lot to deal with. Relentless lets you get a free melee or ranged in after moving, which means you can get 4 red dice, 4 black dice, and 2 white dice into a unit in 1 turn. That is good. Their speed is great and lets you harass any enemy objective holders. Agile 1 gives them a lot more durability, and all in all, these are worth taking in a list. Their only weakness is saving on white. Starting out our heavies is the T-47 Airspeeder. The T-47 Airspeeder is a very expensive harassing unit. With Arsenal 2, you can use its main cannon and its free harpoon upgrade for your attack. The tow cable is very useful as it lets you pivot an enemy vehicle by force. It can be hard to hit for your enemy, but its durability isn't amazing either, saving on whites. And it is possible for it to be focused down early if the enemy has decent anti-armor. Due to this and the point cost of it, you really want to build a list around this model instead of adding it in because it's what you can fit into a list. Next up is the X-34 Landspeeder. It is a cheaper, heavy option the Rebels have access to. With Armor 2, Arsenal 3, and Cover 1, you're doing a surprising amount of damage while also being very survivable. But to take advantage of Arsenal 3, you have to add in the Rocket Gunner and the Rifle Gunner, which makes your speeder go to a 1 red, 1 black, and 5 white dice attack all in all. Light Transport means you can only carry a single hero mini, but considering how it is harder to kill this than the hero, it seems like it can be worth it to make sure your important character can survive in some scenarios. Again, this is a situational unit, but it's not terrible. And lastly is the AA-5 speeder truck, the battle bus, the party bus. The AA-5 is a strong option for best transport in the game, with hover and a weak point in the rear, and because it's closed you can't shoot anything out of it. However, it can be an actual threat when upgraded with guns, and when properly upgraded it can also heal some of your dead models back to the field. This is useful for whatever army it's in. And finally, a possible first list for the Rebels. It is Cassian, K2. Rebel troopers with different upgrades, Rebel Pathfinders with different upgrades, some Wookie warriors, an AA-5 speeder truck, and an ATRT. At 10 activations, it's a pretty decent list. Could be a lot better, but I wanted to give you an example of what a Rebel list could look like, and I mean, you can see my bias towards what I like with Rebels right now anyway. Thank you so much for the outpouring of support on this channel. Making Legion and other wargame related content is a ton of fun. And having a creative outlet is amazing. I want to just genuinely thank anyone who's made it this far in the video for watching it. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'm trying to reply to as many comments as I can. More of this will be coming soon. Have a great day.